You have been sold a lie. For the last century, pop culture has repackaged an ancient horror into a symbol of rebellion, a feminist icon who refused to submit. But the archaeological record tells a radically different story. We are not dealing with a misunderstood goddess. We are dealing with a spiritual pathogen that has plagued humanity for 4,000 years. If you think invoking this name brings empowerment, you are playing with a loaded gun. The ancients didn't worship her. They built intricate traps to starve her. We have uncovered the evidence from the blood-stained amulets of Syria to the inverted bowls buried under Babylonian door frames. To understand the true face of the night monster, we must strip away the modern makeup and look at the raw forensic data. What we are about to open is not just a history book, it is a warning label that was torn off centuries ago. And it begins not with a woman, but with a sound in the dark. To understand the entity known as Lilith, we must perform a linguistic autopsy on the Sumerian root Lil. Before she was anthropomorphized into a woman, she was an elemental force, a terrifying acoustic signature in the ancient world. In the Proto-Semitic lexicon, Lil does not romanticize the darkness. It specifically denotes air, wind, or storm. This philological evidence suggests that the original manifestation was not a biological entity with agency, but a destructive atmospheric phenomenon. We are looking at the Kiskil Lila, a term found in the earliest Mesopotamian word lists, which describes a phantom spirit carried by the dry, pestilent winds that destroyed crops and brought fever. The forensic analysis of cuneiform tablets reveals a stark contrast to the modern sexualized interpretation of this figure. In the theology of Eridu and Nippur, the wind was the domain of Enlil, the lord of the air. The Lil spirits were distinct corruptions of this element. They were the storm demons that possessed no physical form but exerted physical pressure. This connects ancient Sumerian demons to the very air the ancients breathed, an invisible, suffocating presence that could not be fought with swords, only with apotropaic magic. The terror was not in what she looked like, but in the sound of the wind howling through the reeds, a sound that signaled the onset of disease. Academically, we must strip away the medieval accretion of Adam's first wife. That narrative is a late addition, a cover-up. The core truth lies in the Akkadian Lilitu. This word is feminine in grammatical gender, but monstrous in nature. It signifies a specific type of wind spirit that had evolved, or devolved, from a simple storm into a predatory ghost. The transition from an elemental force of nature to a personified demon marks a critical shift in human psychology. The moment we gave a face to the invisible forces that killed us in the night. The Kiskil Lila is often mentioned alongside the Idlu Lila, her male counterpart, indicating a dualistic nature to this wind-borne plague. However, the female aspect was always feared more intensely. Why? Because the wind penetrates the home. It enters through cracks in the mud brick walls. It is an intruder that bypasses locks. This established the primary characteristic of the Lilith archetype, the uninvited guest. She is the draught that extinguishes the candle, the sudden chill that signifies a breach in the spiritual perimeter. We also find evidence in the connection to the hand of the ghost, Katatimi. Medical texts from the Neo-Assyrian period often attribute sudden paralysis or stroke to the touch of these wind spirits. The Lil was not seducing men in their sleep at this stage. She was stopping their hearts with the pressure of a storm condensed into a singular point. The wee Mesopotamian mythology Lilitu was a biological hazard, a vector of death that struck without warning, indifferent to human morality or prayer. Furthermore, the linguistic bridge between Sumerian Lil and Hebrew Lael, night, creates a semantic trap. While the phonetic similarity fused the concepts later in history, the original entity belongs to the storm, not just the darkness. She is the turbulence of the void. By categorizing her merely as a night monster, later translations diluted her true power. She is the chaos of the uncontrolled atmosphere, the breath of a hostile universe. But this elemental wind did not remain abstract for long. As the civilizations of Mesopotamia grew, the horror needed a body and the Lil fragmented into a specific, organized hierarchy of predators. We must now navigate the taxonomic structure of Mesopotamian demonology to understand that Lilith was originally not a proper name, but a biological classification. In the earliest cuneiform records, we encounter the Lilitu not as a singular villainess, but as a specific genus of predatory spirits. This distinction is crucial for accurate historical reconstruction. The ancient Sumerians did not fear one woman, they feared a swarm. The Lilitu existed alongside the Lilu, the male variant, and the terrifying Ardat Lili, the phantom bride. These were not fallen angels, they were primordial errors of creation, spirits that occupied the liminal space between the living and the dead, driven by a mechanical need to survive through parasitism. The Ardat Lili is perhaps the most disturbing component of this triad, representing the ghost of a young woman who died before marriage or childbirth. In the strict social structure of our ancient Sumerian demons, this lack of biological fulfillment created a spiritual vacuum. She returns not to haunt, but to complete the life she was denied. She is the maid of desolation, eternally drifting through windows, seeking a husband she can never hold, and children she can never nurse. This pathology of unfulfillment is the engine that drives the entire Lilitu class. It is not evil in the moral sense. It is a desperate, starving hunger for a life that is biologically impossible for them to sustain. These entities are defined by what they lack. The texts explicitly describe them as those who have no milk, those who do not know the bond of a child, and those who have no husband. This sterility is weaponized. Because they cannot produce life, the Lilitu are compelled to steal it. This is the root of the Lilith demon origin story. It begins with envy. The Lilitu roam the night looking for men, not for seduction in the modern romantic sense, but to extract the fluid of life, to create offspring that are born dead or monstrous. It is a crude, spiritual, artificial insemination that always fails, resulting in their eternal rage against mortal mothers who succeed where they fail. The archaeological record shows that this fear was omnipresent. We find references to the Lilitu in diagnostic texts used by the Ashipu, exorcists. Unlike the gods who resided in temples, the Lilitu resided in the desert, or the ruins, places devoid of civilization. They were the anti-social element, the rejection of domestic order. When a man suffered from nocturnal emissions or wasting sickness, it was diagnosed as an assault by the Ardat Lili. She was physically attaching herself to the victim, draining his vitality to fill her own void. This was not a myth to the Sumerians. It was a medical diagnosis for wasting diseases and reproductive failure. We must also analyze the gender dynamics of this predation. While the male Lilu existed, the texts overwhelmingly focus on the female variants. This suggests a deep-seated cultural anxiety regarding the reproductive role of women in Mesopotamia. A woman without a child was viewed with suspicion, and a dead woman without a child became a demon. The Lilitu is the projection of this societal fear, a female force that is untamed by marriage and unburdened by maternal care, converting that potential energy into destruction. She is the strange woman mentioned in later wisdom literature, but here she is a spectral reality. The visual descriptions from this era are scarce but terrifying. They are often depicted as having the talons of birds of prey, indicating their snatching nature. They do not walk, they swoop. This avian characteristic links back to the wind origin, but adds a predatory intelligence. They wait in the rafters. They hide in the shadows of the bedchamber. The Mesopotamian mythology, Lilitu, were the ultimate domestic terrorists, turning the safest place on earth, the bedroom, into a hunting ground. However, for centuries, these spirits remained faceless threats, a nameless collective of night terrors without a central protagonist. They lacked a specific identity until a single poet decided to condense this cloud of demons into a specific antagonist within a royal narrative. To witness the first narrative crystallization of this entity, we must turn to the dark corners of Sumerian literature, specifically the Epic of Gilgamesh. While the standard version of the epic is widely known, the crucial evidence lies in the often overlooked Tablet Tutint, a translation of an earlier Sumerian poem, Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Netherworld. Here we find the entity not as a ruler, but as a squatter, a stubborn infestation in the divine order. This text provides the earliest literary prototype for the figure we now identify as Lilith, appearing under the name Kisikil Lillake. The setting is Inanna's Hulupu tree, a sacred willow planted on the banks of the Euphrates. This tree represents the axis mundi, the growth of civilization and the future throne of the goddess of love and war. Inanna nurtures this tree, hoping to craft her bed and throne from its wood, symbolizing the establishment of domestic and royal power. However, the tree becomes corrupted. It is invaded by three distinct parasites representing chaos: a serpent at the roots, the Anzu bird in the branches, and the dark maid, Ki Sikil Lil Lake, who builds her house in the trunk. This specific placement is symbolic. She occupies the heart of the tree, the very core of the civilized world Inanna is trying to build. The Ki Sikil Lil Laki is described as a maid who despoils, a creature of pure obstruction. She does not attack Inanna directly. She simply refuses to leave, blocking the goddess's ability to mature and assume her power. This establishes the entity as the ultimate anti-structure force. She is the wild growth that chokes the garden, the chaotic variable that prevents the equation of civilization from balancing. Enter Gilgamesh. He acts as the brute force of order. Donning his armor, the king of Uruk approaches the infested tree. He strikes down the serpent, causing the Anzu bird to flee to the mountains. The reaction of the dark maid is pivotal. The maid who despoils, destroys her house, and flees to the desolate wilderness. She does not fight the hero. She retreats into the void. This moment solidifies her eternal archetypal designation as the outcast. She is not defeated in the sense of being destroyed. She is merely displaced. This displacement is significant. By fleeing to the waste places, the desert, she becomes associated with the wild, uncultivated lands where demons dwell. In the ancient mindset, the city was safety, order, and the wilderness was chaos, death. By banishing her there, the text confirms that she has no place in human society. She is the other. She belongs to the hyenas and the owls, to the places where humanity cannot survive. This narrative beat, the flight to the wilderness, will be repeated thousands of years later in Hebrew folklore, proving the continuity of this specific myth. Scholars like Samuel Noah Kramer argued fiercely for the identification of Ki Sikil Lil Lake as the prototype of Lilith. While some modern philologists debate the exact translation, the functional role is identical. We see a female spirit associated with wind, Lila, and darkness, who disrupts the sexual and domestic order, Inanna's bed, and is driven out by a patriarchal hero. The blueprint for the first Eve is drafted here, etched in clay long before the Bible was written. The Hulupu tree incident teaches us that this entity cannot be domesticated. She cannot be integrated into the structure of the tree. She must be excised like a tumor. Gilgamesh thought he had solved the problem by driving her into the desert, but he only moved the threat out of sight. In the shadows of that wilderness, the myth would mutate, waiting for a new theological crisis to give her a new purpose. We now leave the realm of poetic metaphor and handle the cold, limestone evidence of the 7th century BC. In 1933, at the archaeological site of Arslan Tash in northern Syria, excavations unearthed a small perforated plaque that shattered the romanticized image of this entity. This is the Arslan Tash amulet, a piece of portable apotropaic technology designed for one purpose: protection against the night. The object itself is small, intended to be hung on a wall or worn around the neck, acting as a spiritual shield. But it is the carving on the surface that freezes the blood, a crude, violent depiction that predates the medieval femme fatale by over a millennium. The iconography on the amulet does not show a beautiful, rebellious woman. It depicts a sphinx-like creature, or perhaps a wolf with wings, in the act of devouring a human child. The creature has a scorpion's tail, symbolizing a venomous strike. This is the true visual histories of the entity, before centuries of artistic revisionism softened her edges. To the Phoenicians and Arameans who crafted this object, she was a chimera of nature's most efficient killers: the wolf, the scorpion, the bird of prey. The carving is not art, it is a mugshot. It captures the predator in the act of consumption, serving as a warning to the spirit realm that the inhabitants of the house know her true face. The text inscribed around this monstrous figure is a Phoenician incantation of binding. It reads, "O flyer in a dark room, go away at once, O Lily." This is the smoking gun. The explicit use of the name Lily connects the Mesopotamian wind demon directly to the Canaanite sphere. The inscription continues with a pact, stating that the house has been sealed against her entry. This proves that apotropaic magic was the primary interaction humans had with her. There were no temples to Lilith, no priestesses, no worship. There was only fear and the desperate attempt to lock the door against her. We must analyze the psychological implications of the flyer in a dark room. The ancients believed that she could compress her form to enter through the keyhole or the window latch. The amulet was often hung in the nursery, the room most vulnerable to her attacks. This creates a direct link to the high infant mortality rates of the ancient world. When a child died in the night with no visible cause, the parents did not blame bacteria, they blamed the strangler. The Arslan Tash amulets were the vaccines of the Iron Age, a desperate immunological response against a spiritual pathogen. This artifact also demolishes the modern neo-pagan idea of Lilith as a symbol of female empowerment or sexual liberation. In the harsh reality of the 7th century BC, she was the devourer. The imagery of the wolf eating the child is explicit. It represents the inversion of the maternal instinct. The mouth that should kiss and feed is the mouth that bites and swallows. To the people of Arslan Tash, she was the ultimate abomination of nature, a thing that fed on the future of the tribe. The Sphinx elements on the plaque also suggest her role as a guardian of thresholds, but a hostile one. She blocks the passage of life. The scorpion tail links her to the desert heat and sudden, painful death. Every element of the visual design is calculated to induce repulsion. The artist did not want to capture her beauty. They wanted to capture her monstrosity to shame the demon away. It is a visual exorcism carved in stone. Yet this monstrous wolf-bird hybrid was about to undergo a radical metamorphosis. As the oral traditions of the Hebrews began to coalesce into written text, the rabbinic scholars faced a theological loophole in the book of Genesis that needed to be closed. They would take this wolf from the wilderness, strip off her fur, give her the skin of a woman, and place her in the Garden of Eden. We must now fast forward over a millennium to the Middle Ages, c. 700–1000 AD, to witness the birth of the most famous and most misunderstood version of the myth. This is the moment of corruption. The source text is the Alphabet of Ben Sira, a satirical yet religiously significant compilation of Jewish folklore. Here, the rabbis and scribes were not writing erotica. They were attempting to solve a glaring theological error in the Torah. They were faced with a textual contradiction known as the two creations. Genesis 1:27 states, "Male and female he created them," implying simultaneous creation. Yet Genesis 2:22 describes the creation of Eve from Adam's rib. To reconcile this, they concluded there must have been a first Eve. This exegetical loophole birthed the narrative of Lilith as Adam's first wife. But unlike the romanticized modern version, the text describes her creation as flawed from the start. While Adam was made from pure dust, later traditions suggest Lilith was formed from filth and sediment, the dregs of the earth. This inherent impurity predestined the conflict. The forbidden Bible history, kept out of the canonical text, reveals that their union was doomed not by lack of love, but by a power struggle over dominance. Lilith refused to lie beneath Adam during intercourse, stating explicitly, "We are equal because we are both created from the earth." This assertion of equality was not a request for civil rights. In the context of the era, it was a violation of cosmic hierarchy. When Adam tried to force her compliance, she did the unthinkable. She uttered the ineffable name of God, the Tetragrammaton. This act of linguistic sorcery gave her the power of flight, allowing her to escape the Garden of Eden and flee to the Red Sea, a place historically associated with demons and lascivious spirits. It is here that she ceases to be a human woman and fully embraces her destiny as a monster. God sent 3 angels, Senoi, Sansanoi, and Semangelof, to retrieve her. Their confrontation at the Red Sea is the foundational contract of Jewish folk magic. Lilith refuses to return. She argues that she was created for a specific purpose, to weaken the infants. She accepts a terrifying bargain to maintain her freedom. She agrees that if she sees the names of the 3 angels written on an amulet, she will leave the child alone. However, the cost of her freedom is blood. She accepts that 100 of her own demon children will die every day. This narrative was invented to explain the inexplicable horror of sudden infant death syndrome, SIDS. In a world without autopsies or germ theory, the death of a healthy infant in the night needed a cause. Lilith became the scapegoat. The story transforms her from a wind spirit into a child-killing anti-mother. Her grief over her own dying offspring drives her to strangle the children of Eve. It is a cycle of eternal vengeance. She is not a feminist icon here. She is the personification of maternal grief turned toxic. The alphabet of Ben Sira thus cements her role as the mother of demons. She spends her days at the Red Sea spawning Lilim, demon children, with lascivious spirits, building an army that invisible surrounds humanity. The text warns that she has dominion over all male children for 8 days, until circumcision, and female children for 20 days. During these windows of vulnerability, she is the absolute predator. This text moved Lilith from the desert ruins into the nursery. She was no longer just a vague spirit of the wind. She was a named entity with a specific legal contract that could be exploited. To enforce this contract and keep the strangler at bay, the people turned to a specific, mass-produced form of clay technology designed to trap her. To understand how the ancients fought this entity, we must dig beneath the doorframes of Mesopotamia. Between the 6th and 8th centuries AD and the Sasanian era, a unique form of spiritual ballistics was developed, the Babylonian incantation bowls. Archaeologists have recovered thousands of these ordinary clay vessels. Inscribed with Aramaic, Syriac, and Mandaic scripts, they were not for eating or drinking. They were buried upside down under the thresholds of houses, in the corners of bedrooms, and specifically in cemeteries. This inverted placement was not accidental. It was a mechanical function of the trap. The bowl represented a dome, a metaphysical cage designed to capture the demon as it attempted to rise from the underworld or enter the home. The writing on these bowls is a masterpiece of psychological warfare. The text almost always spirals from the center outwards or from the rim inwards. This spiral trap was designed to dizzy and disorient the spirit. The theory was that the demon, compelled to read the incantation, would follow the line of text until it became trapped in the center, unable to navigate its way back out. It is a labyrinth of words. Inside this ceramic prison, we find the most frequent prisoner is none other than Lilith. She is named explicitly, often with her aliases, Batnai, Odam, Amorpho, revealing that she was the primary target of this mass-produced magic. The language used in these incantations is strictly juridical. It is a legal battle. The exorcists did not ask Lilith to leave. They served her with a get, a formal bill of divorce. The text often reads, "I divorce you, I dismiss you, I banish you, O Lilith." By using the legal language of divorce, the homeowner was severing any spiritual claim the demon might have over the household. In the ancient mind, demons operated on a distorted version of human law. By formally divorcing her, the victim removed her legal right to enter the premises. It was a courtroom drama played out in clay and buried in the dirt. We also find crude drawings in the center of the bowls, depicting Lilith with wild hair, bound hands, and chained feet. These are not artistic expressions. They are sympathetic magic. By drawing her bound, the magician binds her reality. The image anchors the demon to the bowl, pinning her under the weight of the earth. The sheer volume of these artifacts, found in Jewish, Christian, and Mandaean households alike, proves that the fear of Lilith transcended religious boundaries. She was an equal opportunity predator, and the incantation bowl was the universal weapon of choice against her. Specific bowls address her as the strangler of boys. The desperation in the ink is palpable. We find bowls commissioned for specific families, listing the names of the husband, wife, and children, essentially creating a protective circle around the biological unit. The magic was specific, local, and defensive. It wasn't about summoning her for power. It was about building a spiritual firewall. The Lilith of the bowls is a chaotic, irrational force that must be contained by the rigid structure of the law and the physical containment of the vessel. This archaeological evidence radically shifts our understanding of the witch. In these texts, Lilith is often accused of acting like a witch herself, casting evil eyes and weaving spells. The bowls are counter-magic. They act as a mirror, reflecting her own malice back onto her. If she tries to curse the house, the bowl captures that energy and grounds it. It is a static, eternal sentinel that guards the door while the family sleeps. However, the terror preserved in these clay traps has been largely forgotten by the modern world. Today, we see a completely different version of this entity on our screens, a leather-clad anti-heroine or a misunderstood goddess. We must now dismantle the Hollywood gloss and confront the gap between the historical monster and the pop culture icon. We must now surgically remove the Hollywood filter that has obscured the true nature of this entity. In the modern zeitgeist, specifically in franchises like the Supernatural, the chilling adventures of Sabrina, or the lore of Diablo, Lilith is elevated to the status of a dark matriarch. She is depicted as the Queen of Hell, a powerful, organized ruler who commands armies and sits on a throne of bone. This is a fabrication. It is a projection of our modern desire for a feminist anti-hero. The historical reality, dug from the grimoires and the rotting scrolls of Kabbalah, is far more pathetic and terrifying. She is not a queen, she is a vagrant. The Zohar, the foundational work of Jewish mysticism, does not describe her as a ruler of a kingdom. It describes her as a creature of the Sitra Achras, the other side, synonymous with impurity and waste. She has no territory. She is structurally defined by her homelessness. While modern media paints her as the Kuis, mother of demons, in a regal sense, the ancient texts describe a mother who eats her own young or watches them die daily. Her power is not administrative dominion over hell. It is the chaotic, uncontrollable power of starvation. She wanders the earth in a state of eternal hunger, a scavenger picking at the scraps of life left by the holy. In the video game, Diablo 4, Lilith is the Blessed Mother, the creator of sanctuary. This creates a theological confusion. Historically, Lilith cannot create. She can only corrupt. The defining trait of the Lilitu class is sterility. They mock creation. The idea that she could build a world or a society is antithetical to her very definition as a force of entropy. She is the wind that knocks down the house, not the architect who builds it. The pop culture version gives her agency and a master plan. The historical version acts on pure animalistic instinct to survive the night. Furthermore, the sexualization of Lilith in modern media, often portrayed as a seductive dominatrix, misinterprets the ancient mechanism of her sexuality. In the Talmudic traditions, she does not seduce men for pleasure or romance. She attacks them to steal seed. It is a biological heist. She is trying to build a body for her spirit children using stolen human matter. It is a parasitic interaction, not a romantic or erotic one. By turning her into a sex symbol, modern culture has sanitized the gross, violation-based nature of the original law. We also see a misunderstanding of her relationship with Satan, or Samael. In popular culture, she is often his equal partner, or the power behind the throne. In the Kabbalah, treatise on the left emanation, their union is necessary to bring about the destruction of the world, but it is a union of two blind, chaotic forces. God is said to have castrated the male aspect to prevent their progeny from overwhelming the world. They are a broken, dysfunctional pair, not a power couple. The rebranding of Lilith as a symbol of female independence ignores the fact that her independence in the myth comes at the cost of being a child murderer. The ancient world did not view her refusal to submit to Adam as a heroic stance. They viewed it as the moment she chose death over life. To reclaim her as a hero requires ignoring 90% of the source material, which is dedicated to her role in killing neonates. So, if she is not the leather-clad Queen of Hell, and what is she? She is a shadow that sits on the chest. She is the weight that crushes the breath. This brings us to the only place where Lilith indisputably exists in the real world, the intersection of neurology and terror. We must now bridge the gap between ancient clay tablets and modern neurology. The phenomenon of Lilith is not merely a mythological construct. It is a biological reality experienced by millions of people, misdiagnosed for centuries. In the annals of folklore, this is known as the old hag syndrome. In clinical terms, it is sleep paralysis. The description of the Lilitu attacks in ancient Sumer, the weight on the chest, the inability to move, the sense of a malevolent presence, aligns with terrifying precision to the symptoms of this parasomnia. We are not dealing with a ghost. We are dealing with a glitch in the human brainstem. The mechanism is physiological. During REM, rapid eye movement sleep, the brain induces a state of atonia, complete muscle paralysis, to prevent us from physically acting out our dreams. Sometimes the mind wakes up before the body. The switch fails to flip back. The victim is fully conscious, eyes open, but chemically straitjacketed in their own skin. In this state of hypervulnerability, the brain's amygdala, the threat detection center, goes into overdrive. Seeking an explanation for the paralysis, the mind projects a hallucination, a dark, shadowy figure sitting on the sleeper's chest. This biological terror explains the sexual aspect of the Lilith myth. The Lilitu were said to steal the seed of men. Modern sleep science confirms that sleep paralysis is often accompanied by sexual arousal or nocturnal emissions due to the erratic firing of neurons and the intense rush of blood associated with the panic response. The ancients, lacking MRIs, interpreted this involuntary biological release in the presence of a shadow as a demonic theft. Lilith was the explanation for the inexplicable shame of the body reacting to terror with arousal. The universality of this experience is the key evidence. The strangler appears in almost every culture. In Newfoundland, it is the ag-rog. In Japan, kanashibari. In Brazil, the pisadera. The descriptions are identical: a haggard woman or dark entity that crushes the breath. Lilith is simply the Semitic name for this universal neurological event. She is the face the brain paints on the darkness when we are helpless. She is the archetype of the nightmare, derived from the Old English mare, a demon that rides the sleeper. We must also consider the auditory hallucinations reported in these states: the sound of buzzing, howling wind, or indecipherable whispering. Recall the etymology of Lil, wind, storm. The ancients heard the blood rushing in their ears during these panic attacks and called it the wind demon. The sensory data has not changed in 4,000 years, only our vocabulary has. We moved from exorcisms to sleep clinics, but the monster remains the same. This demystification does not reduce her power. It makes her more formidable. It means Lilith lives inside the architecture of our own minds. She is hardwired into our biology. As long as humans sleep, as long as we have a REM cycle, she will exist waiting in the threshold between waking and dreaming. She is the shadow that the conscious mind casts when it loses control of the body. However, reducing her to a mere hallucination fails to answer the deeper metaphysical question. Why is this specific shadow necessary for the structure of the universe? To answer this, we must leave science behind and enter the forbidden realm of the Qliphoth. We now ascend from the biological to the metaphysical. To truly comprehend the persistence of this entity, we must open the Zohar and enter the forbidden theology of the Kabbalah. Here, Lilith is not merely a demon. She is a cosmic structural component known as the Qliphoth, the shells or husks. In this Gnostic-adjacent worldview, holiness is like a blinding, infinite light. For the universe to exist physically, that light had to be concealed, veiled, and contained. The Qliphoth are the dirty vessels that hold the light. Lilith is the primary shell of impurity that surrounds the holiness of the Shekinah, the divine presence. This changes everything. It means Lilith is not an accident. She is a byproduct of creation itself. The Kabbalists argue that God created one thing opposite the other. For every aspect of holiness, there is a corresponding shadow in the Sitra Achra, the other side. If the Shekinah represents the nurture, stability, and divine motherhood of the cosmos, Lilith represents the anti-structure, the sterile, the chaotic, and the wild. She is the necessary darkness that allows the light to be visible. Without the night monster, the safety of the day has no definition. The texts describe a terrifying symmetry. Just as there is a holy tree of life, Sephiroth, there is a tree of death. Lilith sits at the base of this dark tree, often associated with the sphere of Malkuth, the kingdom, in its fallen state. She acts as the gateway to the abyss. The danger described in the treatise on the left emanation is that if humanity sins, the barrier breaks. The shell becomes the dominant reality, and the fruit, holiness, rots inside. This is not about a woman refusing to submit. This is about the entropy of the universe consuming its own structure. We must also address the blind dragon. In these texts, Lilith is often paired with Samael, the severity of God, Satan. They form a syzygy, a divine couple of the dark side. However, the mystics wrote that to prevent them from destroying the world with their offspring, God castrated the male aspect, Samael. This leaves Lilith in a state of eternal, unfulfilled desire. She is the widow of a living husband, a force of pure longing that can never be satisfied. This metaphysical hunger is what drives the physical manifestations of the demon we see in folklore. She is the cosmic void trying to fill itself. This perspective reveals the ultimate horror. We are not protecting ourselves from an external invader, but from a necessary part of reality. The Qliphoth are the waste products of the divine process, the dregs of the wine. We live in a world composed of these shells. To exist in a physical body is to exist in the realm of Lilith. She is the patron saint of the flesh, of mortality, of everything that rots and dies. In this light, the Ardat Lily of Sumer, the child killer of Ben Sira, and the sleep paralysis hag are all just masks worn by this deeper, abstract principle of negation. She is the spirit of no, the refusal to be born, the refusal to submit, the refusal to die quietly. She is the scream of the void. But if she is the shadow, where is the light? If she is the shell, what happens when we crack it open? We have dissected the wind, the demon, the psychology, and the theology. Now, we must synthesize this into a final warning. We have reached the end of the investigation, but the investigation has likely just begun for you. We arrive at the final, and perhaps most dangerous, chapter of this investigation. The modern occult inversion. For 4,000 years, from the ziggurats of Ur to the shtetls of Eastern Europe, the interaction with Lilith had a singular goal: suppression. The incantation bowls, the amulets, the prayers, every piece of spiritual technology was designed to keep the Strangler out. However, in the late 19th and 20th centuries, a radical shift occurred within Western esotericism. We stopped locking the door and started inviting her in. This shift began with the Romantic poets and crystallized in the rituals of the Yugti, left-hand path. Modern practitioners of Luciferianism, draconian magic, and the darker streams of Wicca no longer view Lilith as a pathogen, but as an initiatrix. She is invoked as a symbol of sexual liberation, anti-patriarchal power, and forbidden wisdom. But we must apply our forensic lens to this practice. By invoking the archetype of the Lilitu, these practitioners are essentially inviting entropy into their psychological structure. They are attempting to domesticate a storm. The danger lies in the sanitization of the entity. The Instagram witch aesthetic presents Lilith as a fierce, independent goddess of justice. This is a dangerous misreading of the primary sources. When one performs a ritual to invoke Lilith based on this pop culture understanding, they are opening a channel to the Qliphothic shell of impurity discussed in the Zohar. They expect empowerment. What they historically receive is instability. The chaos that Gilgamesh drove into the desert is now being summoned into the living room under the guise of self-help. We see the consequences in the narratives of those who delve too deep into Qliphothic pathworking, the exploration of the shadow tree. The Tunnel of Lilith is described in modern occult grimoires, like those of Kenneth Grant, as a place of desolation and hollow echo. It is the sphere of the false moon. The psychological toll of aligning oneself with a force defined by lack and hunger can be devastating. It manifests not as power, but as a fracturing of the self, a disintegration of relationships, mental stability, and the ability to find peace. The irony is palpable. The ancient mother in Babylon buried a bowl to save her child from the wind demon. The modern seeker lights a black candle to summon her. We have stripped the warning labels off the poison bottle because we like the design of the skull on the label. We have confused the shadow, which must be integrated per Jung, with the void, which consumes. This investigation has traced the wind from the reeds of Sumer to the sleep paralysis of the modern bedroom. We have seen her as a storm, a bird, a wolf, a demon, and a goddess. But the core truth remains unchanged. She is the unbounding. She is the force that refuses to serve life. To understand her is to understand the fragility of our own order. We built walls and laws and gods to keep the night at bay. Lilith is the reminder that the night is always waiting just outside the glass. We have now mapped the entire anatomy of the monster. The evidence is laid out. The bowls are broken, the amulets are red, and the grimoires are closed. The only thing left is to step back and look at the whole picture, to understand why, despite the terror, we cannot stop whispering her name. We have traced the wind from the reeds of the Euphrates to the paralysis of the modern mind. We have dissected the clay, translated the curses, and exposed the romantic lies we tell ourselves to sleep at night. But the data points to a terrifying conclusion. Lilith is not merely a demon to be banished. She is a structural necessity of the cosmos. She is the Koliphoth, the shell that defines the nut. She is the shadow that proves the light exists. Perhaps the ancients feared her not because she was alien, but because she represented the chaotic, hungry void that lives inside every human heart. We build walls of law and religion to keep the wilderness out, but she is the reminder that the wilderness is waiting just beneath our skin. The question is no longer, is she real? The question is, when the lights go out and the paralysis sets in, who is watching who? To continue this investigation into the abyss and to uncover the histories that the daylight tries to hide, make sure you are subscribed. The archives are open.